And what was very interesting is when the rats had a natural life and they had access to playmates and the outdoors and more space to run around, they were not interested in the cocaine. When they removed playmates from the rat cage, they would go increasingly more and more to the cocaine. Every time they took away a more natural existence for the rat, the higher the incidences of the addiction to the cocaine become. Hello, radical health seekers. Welcome back to the show. We got an action-packed episode for you today. We're looking at why we do what we do, what is really driving our behaviors, how do addictive tendencies arise, and what is the cost of cheap dopamine in a world full of it. And then, of course, we have our questions. Our live callers today had some amazing questions. We covered, is olive oil a good cooking fat? We talked about lupus and autoimmune disease. We talked about whether too much protein is bad for those kidneys. We discussed whether, will I ever be able to eat a vegetable again? And we talked about hyperdosing supplements like vitamin C, or maybe even hyperdosing heart and soil supplements. It's a fun show. I think it's a very impactful show. It will give you some really cool insights into managing your tendencies around social media or cheap unearned dopamine and ways to bring it back into control so you can earn that dopamine and go about creating your radical health. Let's get into the show. Hey friends, welcome back to the show. I hope you're having a lovely day. We have an interesting conversation today. It's going to span across a few different themes, but what I'm really going to focus on is why we do what we do, how certain addictive or compulsive tendencies arise within us, and focusing on dopamine, this molecule that is getting a lot of traction recently, but more particularly, what is the cost of cheap and unearned dopamine? So I was listening to Andrew Huberman not that long ago, and he said a quote that really stood out to me, and it kind of got me thinking about this a lot. He said that unearned dopamine wrecks people. He said it wrecks and destroys brains. And I was like, wow, it's a pretty big statement. And you know what's interesting about Huberman? He's very smart, but he kind of, he plays a lot of middle sometimes because he's so smart, he's so nuanced. So to hear him so beholdenly say cheap dopamine wrecks people, you know that there's a lot of veracity to that claim. So I started to think about this, and I started to listen to more of Huberman's stuff. And, you know, Anna Lemsky, who wrote the book about dopamine fasting and all of this stuff. And it gets really, really fascinating. So this is a key central player in this whole conversation of understanding what we do and why dopamine can be so sticky. You know, the old cliche that neurons that fire together wire together, and why it creates these certain patterns. And a lot of it is seeking and chasing of this dopamine. And another thing that's driving all of this is potentially our human needs and how they are met or unmet. So let's dive in and really start with this idea again of cheap dopamine, because ancestrally speaking, we need to understand is dopamine is not a bad guy by any means. Dopamine's wonderful. It makes us feel great. If you've had a big hit of dopamine, you feel awesome. It's inherently motivating, and it's very classically related to, you know, feel-good hormones in general. It's the dose. You've got dopamine, D, oxytocin is O, serotonin is the S, and endorphins are the E. These are our feel-good hormones, and we want to create the magical dose in our lives. But again, we spoke about this in previous episodes. Too much of anything, even if it's a good thing, is still too much. The dose makes the poison. And the real issue with dopamine arises in the fact that we can get it at the edge of our fingertips so easily and readily available these days in the forms of hyperpalatable, hyperdopaminergic foods, like we talk about a lot in our framework. Step number 2, elimination of those ultra-processed foods, because they hijack our satiety centers. They make us hungry. They taste bloody delicious, and they've been designed to really hijack that framework so that you keep eating. You know, once you pop, you can't stop, all of that stuff. But because we can so easily get it, and because the problem with a little bit means that we want more of it next time, and it's so easy to acquire that we start to kind of become this little rat that's pushing the dopamine lever over and over and over again. And Mr. Andrew Huberman will tell you that that will destroy your brains and it will lock you into addictive and compulsive tendencies. Because for the majority of our evolution, we would have dopamine. Of course, it's a neurotransmitter. It's inherent in our brains, but we would always get the hit of dopamine after sacrifice, after a virtuous moment, after the hustle, the hunt, the hard work. So again, dopamine is not a bad thing. It's actually really good when it's given in appropriate dose-dependent responses to hard work. So the dopamine feeling that you get after hitting the gym and doing the workout or crossing things off your to-do list and just generally, again, having it follow virtue is very positive. It's inherently motivating. It creates that action and motivation upward spiral, which we want. The problem is the cheap dopamine, the edge of the fingertips dopamine, the quick and easy dopamine that's kind of wrecking us. But I want to really get deep into this before I just say, stop getting cheap dopamine, because that's easy to say and harder to implement, because we can kind of see that we all fall victim to this, myself included. Maybe we go to the scroll hole a little too much. We seek hyper novelty or more dopamine through whatever it is, stimulants, caffeine, whatever. We all have a tendency to want more of this molecule because it's so inherently feel good and motivating, but not necessarily always in the appropriate ancestral framing of it comes after the hard work. But it brings up another question, and this is a really important question to me, and I think it will be very valuable for you to reflect on, which is, why do we do what we do anyway? Why are we seeking these things? Why do we have such a hard time being still with ourselves? And this kind of started a long time ago in the psychological literature, way back with Freud. He was the originator of these ideas of these core human needs. A little bit later up, it was picked up by Maslow, who created the hierarchy of needs. If you're familiar with that, it's, the very basic level is we need food and shelter and water, etc. And then it gets a little deeper in terms of what we need as humans. And more recently in the psychological literature, it's kind of been combined into, depending what you look at, 5 or 6 human needs, really made popular by Tony Robbins, who kind of talks about this a lot, but it's got a really good depth of scientific validation behind it. And ultimately, if you understand the human needs, which we all have, and needs can vary depending on our circumstances, but psychologists have essentially established 6 core human needs that all humans experience. We all have these, and we must fulfill them, because if we don't, there's going to be a piece of us that feels like it's missing. And that part that isn't getting fulfilled or met is usually where these interesting behaviors that are not necessarily self-serving seem to sneak in. So understanding the human needs and looking to fulfill them and actualize them in a healthy, aligned way is really the key to a thriving life. It would be all the way through the puzzle piece of the 7 steps to radical health, like all the way through. It's threaded into every single step of this, like why we choose to eat organs and eliminate processed food and build healthy habits and move our bodies and level up and achieve our why. Is actually, you can see that there's a lesson in each one of these. So I want to kind of just dive into those with you, frame them as this lens to assess why we do certain things with, and then look at some solutions to move through and meet our needs in a little more of a hopeful and aligned way instead of a misaligned way. So the human needs are, there's 6 of them. The first 4 are much more to do with kind of survival, and I guess the last 2, you could say, they're more to do with thriving. So the 1 through 4 shape our personality, and you could call them primal, if you will. And 5 and 6, you could call them more spiritual. So let's break them down a little bit and then assess why these are showing up in our lives and maybe leading to these non-ideal circumstances or behaviors. So number 1, we have a need for certainty. As humans, we like to have a certain sense of control. We need assurance that we will survive and that we will live and that we can avoid pain and avoid death, but also gain pleasure. So we need certainty. We also need, on the flip side of that, because polarity in life, you have to have both sides of the coin, we also need uncertainty, because if everything was too predictable and too safe, well, variety is the spice of life. So we need a sense of the unknown, a sense of adventure, change, new stimuli, something that kind of gets our brains going. We also need significance, okay? We need to feel unique in the world. We need to feel significant. We want to feel needed. We want to feel special. There's that part in all of us that wants to feel respected and seen and just significant. We have a need for connection and love. right? We obviously need that. We really need to feel connected to a purpose or connected to people. We need to feel loved, or we need to love something, whether that's our dog or whether it's how people love us. We need that strong sense of closeness, community, and, threaded through life that is our ultimate driving force, essentially, which is love. So they're the first four, and these are more formative of the primal needs, if you will. And then we move into 5 and 6, which are more about contribution and growth and evolution and being of service. So growth is the 5th need. We have a innate capacity and need inside of each of us to want to grow. We want to get better. We want to evolve. We want to continue learning, expanding our capacity, expanding our range, understanding, and just generally being a student of life. That's all in us. And 6, last but not least, is this need for contribution, a sense of being of service, giving back, leaving things better than you found them, leading, creating a family, or just sharing your gifts and sharing your knowledge and being supportive of people. So if we look at those 6 needs, then we get to ask, what happens if we have these core needs that we all desire to meet, but they are not getting met in our lives because there's no getting away from them? These are highlighted through psychological research that every single person is simultaneously chasing these things because it's at the core of our human animal, and we will meet our needs. But that doesn't mean that we will meet them in a healthy way. It sometimes means that we will meet them just because they need meeting. And this modern life and this hyper-palatable food and this dopaminergic environment is creating the perfect storm for us to meet more of our needs in a misaligned way, which creates just this lack of alignment internally. It's where we might start getting stuck. It's where addictive tendencies can arise from. So think about addiction at a basic level as any behavior that is repeated over and over again that is not producing a desired outcome. Gabor Mate is a very famous researcher in this world, and he says that there are 3 levels of addiction. Number 1 is the craving of the addictive behavior or substance. Number 2 is engaging in the behavior or substance, usually to experience either pleasure or the avoidance of pain. And number 3 is the inability to give the substance or behavior up. So you have this desire, then you have the execution, and then you're really cemented in an addictive tendency when you cannot give it up and you recognize that what you're doing repeatedly is not generating a desired outcome. So that's how we can kind of catch all addiction really quickly and now bring it back into these human needs, because this is at the root of why we're doing what we're doing, and life is practice, and we are who we practice to be. So with the needs, what we want to think about here is if I'm not meeting my needs in a healthy way, which basically means I'll be thriving. If I meet those 6 needs in a healthy, aligned way, I am thriving. I'm doing good. I'm looking after myself. I feel good. I'm rooted in my community, etc. But if I'm not, and I feel a little bit off or something not quite working, then I need to now reference these 6 needs and see which one is not being met in an aligned way. So an example here, just to bring it back to the needs and show some kind of examples of how this might show up in your life is, let's say, for example, we all have a core need for love, which we do, and we don't feel very loved right now. Maybe we moved across country, we're not in a romantic relationship, we don't have a dog, our friends group aren't quite formed yet, so we are missing this need for love. There is nothing to love. I don't feel loved right now. I'm not getting it. I'm not giving it. So I need it, and I'm not getting it in an aligned way. What am I going to do? I'm going to try and find love in maybe a misaligned way. And that could be anything. It might be, well, this pint of ice cream loves me, and I'm going to eat that every night because I get this gooey little dopamine hit every time that I eat that, and I feel a little bit of that love that I'm not getting in an aligned way in my life. And we can never get enough of something that almost works. So that kind of scratches the itch for the 20 minutes of mouth pleasure that we get, and it's kind of soothes that thing. It's the escape of the avoidance, rather, of the discomfort of like, wow, I'm really not feeling loved right now. Now, again, in an ideal world, we would be getting out there and finding love, either to a greater connection or the whole, or to people in our lives, in our communities, and everything like that. Another example might be the certainty one, right? Let's say that we have a need for certainty in our lives because we want to protect ourselves and our families, and things are a little bit up in the air right now. You might be transitioning from a job into a new job. You don't know what the future looks like. So you are a little uncertain, and that's making you very destabilized internally. Now, in an aligned sense, you would try to shore up and make things certain by taking responsibility, mapping out a game plan, becoming disciplined, and controlling the variables that you're in control of. But you can also meet the need for certainty in a misaligned way by repeating old patterns that don't serve you very well, because it's safe. It's the same. This comes back all the way to episode 3 when we talked about mindset on the podcast and how resistance shows up and our minds are kind of working against us because the brain is a predict and protection machine. It's trying to protect you from failure or heartbreak or whatever it is by attempting to predict the future. And it can't predict the future. So what does it do? It just makes you repeat patterns. It ingrains you into doing the same thing you've always done, ensuring that you will get what you've always gotten. Now that is safe and it is predictable and it's meeting the need for certainty, but you can quite clearly see that it's antagonistic to your growth. It's not actually helping you in the long run. So now you can see this dichotomy of having a need, wanting to meet it, but the difference between the way in which we go about this. Now, I often say everything in this game of life and self-improvement starts with awareness. You cannot change anything that you're not aware of. So this is to bring light, to maybe have you step back and say, oh yeah, why am I doing this? Like, why am I wasting 5 hours every single day in the scroll hole on TikTok or Instagram? Why am I, sabotaging myself over and over again with unhealthy food that I know is not serving me? Why do I have, a week in the gym with my good healthy habits and then I fall off and I'm nowhere to be seen for 6 weeks? Then it might be something that's going on here. There's something within these needs that is not being met, and what's taking its place is a misaligned behavior, and that's creating the fertile soil for addiction and dysfunctional patterns. And I used the analogy before of like being the rats pushing the lever. And it reminded me of a very fascinating study, albeit on rats, but it still highlights something. They gave rats unlimited access to cocaine, which is very dopaminergic and highly addictive. And what was very interesting is when the rats had a natural life and they had access to playmates and the outdoors and more space to run around, they were not interested in the cocaine. When they removed playmates from the rat cage, they would go increasingly more and more to the cocaine. Every time they took away a more natural existence for the rat, the higher the incidences of the addiction to the cocaine become. And I think that's somewhat analogous to how we're living right now as we get further and further and further away from our natural tendencies and the way in which we've lived for such a long time. We go to things that soothe that itch with dopamine. Now, hopefully nobody's doing cocaine, but we have dopamine at the edge of our fingers again in these quick hits through social media and food. And it's a very interesting idea to think about, that rats wouldn't choose this very powerful drug and stimulant if they just had access to another rat. And how much would we be choosing to spend 4 hours on our screens a day if we just had access to other people that wanted to go and take a walk and be outside? And this, I know I've said social media a lot. It's the one that I really wanted to focus on today, because we think a lot about building healthy habits and habits are so important, but we need time to do that. Not only do we need time to build healthy habits, we need our cognitive capacities operating at full power, because change is difficult and it takes a lot of awareness. Now, if we are losing 20 hours a week, and by the way, I would encourage you to go into settings on your phone and look at your screen time for a pretty big wake-up call, you're going to see that there's ample amount of time there that you could be pulling back and taking responsibility for and using it to build healthy habits, or, food prep a little bit more, or pantry purge, and get out and go find your butcher and buy some organs and go and get the grass-fed beef and all of that fun stuff. But if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got, and you'll get stuck in these patterns. And the reason social media gets highlighted so much is because it's mastered this dopamine game. It's, I often hear it said, and I'm not sure how much truth there is to this, but it's playing on at least a universal truth regarding social media, that the algorithms were designed by the people who designed the slot machines in Las Vegas. And what they're really playing on is this random intermittent reward mechanism in the brain. Essentially, when you pull down on your screen to get a new fresh roll of whatever you're looking at on social media. It might be muscle cars, or it might be butts, or it might be food, or it might be travel locations. Every time you pull down, you don't quite know what you're getting. And sometimes you hit the jackpot and you see exactly what you wanted to, and your brain lights up like a Christmas tree and you get dopamine, ho. But the next time it's not so good. And it keeps you in the seat for a little bit longer. And the algorithm gets to learn you a little bit more, and then it gets to feed you a little bit more of exactly what you want to see. And again, that is the bigger picture that's driving all of this, is what's running underneath it, which is the unmet need. Because I think ultimately, if we're all happy and thriving, we don't want to be inside under artificial lighting, staring at a screen, living vicariously through other people. You know, if we're all happy and thriving, we don't want to be escaping the suffering and conundrums of life by smoking too much or drinking away our problems. If we are in happy, loving relationships, we don't need to be seeking that fake version of love through pornography or, you know, this just cheap hits of dopamine on social media from scantily clad bodies. And I think it's just an important frame to look through, because it's an empowering one that we can take our responsibility for this. We can take our power back. We can take our awareness back and understand that having these compulsive tendencies, having these addictive tendencies, which we all have to one degree or another, is not a moral failing. It's not a broken brain. It's not that you're a bad person or that you're weak or you're not strong enough to just figure this out. It's that once more we see the power, the impact of the evolutionary mismatch that we are living in. You know, we are not designed to live in this modern world, and that means we must approach it with a lot of awareness and a lot of respect to really realize that you are the product. Your attention is the product on these devices. Your mouth is the product for these hyperpalatable foods, and they are all playing on lighting your brain up and creating a very stimulant-driven, dopamine-driven environment, which is creating so many of our addictive tendencies. So we need to take that back. We need to address what needs to be healed in here. We can't move forward if we're carrying this enormous baggage and weight and doing the things that have, you know, put us in this position in the first place. You know, what got you here is not going to get you there. And hopefully there, where you're heading, this path towards radical health, this path towards a brighter future, is requiring, again, that you not only do new things, but you become somebody new. This person that you become is the person that's looking at the human needs and saying like, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm doing good on 3 of these, but I really need to work on these 3. You know, I really need to address the elephant in the room that I'm avoiding, because time is magnifying that problem and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. So I hope that gives you some food for thought, something to sit with and let percolate. If you want to check out the human needs, you can just Google them. There's tons of articles, you know, the more in-depth scientific research on this, and the more kind of blog posts, videos, TED Talks around this topic. A really cool thing to think about, something that you can use as a nice reference point to look and assess at your own life. Because if we can start to move everything forward in that direction, I think we come into alignment. And I think when we come into alignment, everything gets easier. It's easier to eliminate the processed food and eat real food and want to move and want to get outside and want to communicate healthier, and our relationships upgrade themselves. The way we spend our time just gets richer and more full. And that's ultimately what we want, right? And all said and done, health is wealth. We want to be rich in the currency of happiness, and it should be fun. We're not doing this to be so serious and doom and gloom. We're doing this to enrich our lives and the lives of the people around us. So, with all of that said, there's a little bit of homework for you there to do some thinking and noodling on. It's a dangerous thing, that thinking, but I think it's a good thing. And thank you for being here and joining us as we learn and grow with you. But now, without further ado, it is time to talk to our callers. First up is Emily from Florida. Some questions about cooking oils. Emily, are you with us? What can we help you with? How can we help?
I am, thank you. I was really curious because I've been cooking a lot and have listened to a ton of the podcasts about seed oil being bad or unideal. What are your thoughts on olive oil? And is there any kind of cooking oil that you would recommend using if butter and ghee and tallow aren't available or the best fit for the recipe.
Cool. Great question, Emily. Thanks for asking. The good news about like the seed oil slash veggie oil conundrum as it pertains to olive oil is that olives are a fruit. So it's a fruit oil, and it's a much healthier choice than the canola seed, for example, or corn or safflower. The one issue that I want people to be very aware of, because good quality, clean, real, organic olive oil is great. The problem is about 80% of it that's on supermarket shelves has been shown to be adulterated in some way, shape, or form. So this might mean it's either incredibly low quality or it's been cut with seed oils. And this is a very, I don't know, it's a bit poop to realize that you think you're buying olive oil and you're doing good, to know that this is big business. And unfortunately, those incentives are a lot about profits, and there's a lot of this leftover product, and we can just sneak a little bit of it in here. And voila, all of a sudden, I'm not consuming the pure olive oil that I thought I was. So yes, olive oil is great, but you've got to be very diligent about your sourcing. It's a mostly monounsaturated fat. It's high in, these cool compounds. It's got a lot of antioxidants, which prevents it from the oxidative effects of higher heat cooking. So olive oil is a very solid choice. If you want to stay in the plant kingdom for a minute, we've also got good quality avocado oil is a good choice there. It's heat stable. Same issues with olive oil though. Avocado oil can often be cut with these nastier oils. And last but not least, I would say coconut oil, which is mostly saturated, high smoke point. Obviously has a coconutty flavor, so doesn't mix that well with eggs in my opinion. But they would be your plant kingdom stable fats that we would say feel free to use, but we'd always, the deal, right? We're going to steer you towards the animal-based fats. We're going to say good quality tallow, good quality butter, ghee, or even lard if you can find it from, corn and soy-free fed piggies. Those just seem to have much more nutrition from a fat-soluble perspective. They are going to be heat resistant. Again, they're not going to be prone to oxidation. And you can avoid these issues of tampering or cutting of oils because butter is just butter. But like you said, this question was about finding good options when those aren't available. So I hope that gives you a good answer there in terms of, yes, good quality olive oil, good quality avocado oil, good quality coconut oil if the animal fats aren't available. But we'd always like to steer you towards things like the tallow and the butter and the really good quality lard, etc., because little more in these unique fats, long chain fats that are found in animals, and the micronutrients and the fat soluble vitamins. So I hope that is helpful, Emily. All right, next up,
That is. Thank you so
we have Julie, who's a Texas native and has a question about autoimmune disease. Julie, give us some context. What can we help you with?
Yes, hi. So I have lupus. Right after high school, I was diagnosed with lupus and immediately had to go on dialysis. So with that, I was on a very strict diet. Fortunately, I had a kidney transplant 10 years ago, yesterday actually. And I felt like since being on dialysis, I'm already was used to like that strict diet I was on when I was on dialysis. And doctors always told me to avoid taking any kind of supplement and the foods that I eat as well. So I was kind of fearful in taking a heart and soil supplements. But I already took the plunge, and I can say I've been taking it almost for a month now, and have already noticed a huge difference in my brain fog and in my energy levels.
Awesome.
But my first question was related to that, was because my question was, before I started taking it, was if it was safe for me to take these supplements, while also taking, a ton of other medication like my anti-rejection pills. But on top of that, I'm taking cholesterol medication, and I have high blood pressure, and steroids, even prednisone, which has horrible side effects. And I've been told, that I'm supposed to be taking these medications as long as I have my transplanted kidney.
Yeah.
So my question is, is it safe to take these supplements and be on this specific, animal-based diet or lifestyle while taking these medications? And if following this diet, if I can eventually, either get off of any of these medications or eliminate any of them altogether.
Yes, big question, Julie. Thank you. And it sounds like you've been through a lot there, and just want to celebrate your strength and not giving up, not becoming the diagnosis, right? Looking to take your health back. And I think what you said is a really good point to start, which is you did dive in, you did take the plunge, maybe against doctor's orders, but your body is speaking to you and saying, I feel good. My brain fog is subsiding, and that's not nothing. We have to remember that God love our doctors. They care for you. They want the best for you, but they can sometimes be very much locked into almost a fear-based narrative. People fear what they don't understand, and there's a lot of rules and a lot of risk of legislative action if you do something against their orders. So they kind of play it safe, and sometimes you have to listen to your intuition and trust that a little bit, and be willing to just tease some things to see how it's working out. So I'd love to hear, what was the supplement that you started to take? And are you teasing the animal-based diet if you're in it, or you're like tiptoeing in, or you've gone full in? How long has that been? What's the story there before we go any further?
So I came across like Paul's page and Heart and Soil and all that probably over a month ago. And then I've been taking autoimmune stacked supplements for almost a month now. I've been taking them.
Cool.
And like I said, after day one, I noticed a huge difference, because one of the big symptoms of lupus is fatigue. And I would always feel like I need a nap like in the middle of the day. But honestly, the first day I started taking those supplements, I noticed a huge difference in my energy and in my brain fog. I also started to do the animal-based diet. I did that whole challenge thing back in January that he had did. That's basically when I started. But to be honest, I haven't followed it exactly, just because I'm so used to, to eating not horrible, because I feel like once I was diagnosed, I kind of, did more research into, I basically was more aware of what I was putting into my body.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I have been trying to stick to the animal-based diet, but sometimes I do find it difficult to stick exactly to it.
Yes, I hear you. And look, we're always saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. As a general rule of thumb, if you're making the right choices 80% of the time, then don't sweat the 20% so much. That stress can be the thing that really, the straw that breaks the camel's back, as it were. And it just sounds like you're doing, really good. It's pretty new, right? A month, and just feeling almost the immediate effects of adding the supplements in shows me that you're really giving your body what it was craving, and probably clearing up some nutritional deficiencies / inadequacies, because we know that there's so much bioavailable nutrients in some of the stacks, and the effects also on the immune system with something like, the histamine and immune from the thymus, from the kidneys, etc. So that's a really good signal that you're moving in the right direction. What I would say is we're not gonna go near the doctor's orders on what you should do with your medications, but is to continue listening to your body and understanding that you can't cause damage by following an ancestrally appropriate diet that we've eaten forever, right? You're eating real foods, the foods that we are designed to eat. If anything, you're only protecting yourself against the worsening of these autoimmune conditions. You're not going to, cause damage. You are going to help yourself. You're going to give your body the stuff that it needs. And I think that's very undervalued sometimes. We're always looking to like the prednisones or the other medications as the savior, but usually they are the band-aids over bullet wounds, right? They're just kind of keeping symptoms in check, but they're not fixing anything. If we're truly going to fix something, we want to get to the root cause. And of course, that takes time. It's going to take longer than a month, and it's going to have to be, well thought out and well planned, and it's going to require consistency. But I can't tell you the amount of anecdotal data and evidence that we have through a channel like Heart and Soil of so many people completely reversing, or basically putting extreme autoimmune conditions into a place where they're very manageable and they've got off medications. We can't sit here and say that this diet will cure and fix everything, of course, because we just don't know. But what we do know and can say confidently is that if that is your goal and that's your personal goal, which we love to support, the way in which you're going to do that is looking at our framework. It's eating organs, check. It's eliminating processed food, check. But it's also the building of healthy habits. Like, it's the managing of stress. It's the sunlight. It's the play. It's the movement. It's the leveling up. It's looking for the environmental toxins. It's anchoring yourself to a why. So it's all of this. It's a very holistic approach because autoimmune conditions are tricky. We know there are certain consistent themes. We know there's a gut component to it and a hyperactive immune response to it and a stress response to it. But there's so much going on here, from the way you regulate your mind and the way you find joy in life and your connections and your love, and do you ground yourself and get sunlight and all of that stuff. So from a nutritional perspective, it sounds like you're really on a good path. And my hope for you is that as you continue on this path, that you feel healthy and you continue to feel healthier and healthier, which creates that inherent momentum of motivation, because you're going to be like, wow, I feel this good after a month. Like, how am I going to feel in 6 months? And who knows what that looks like in a year, and your ability to pull down or pull back on these medications if your doctor's open to that, because you're thriving. And I think that's how we get there. But I also just want to, touch on the other things too, that diet doesn't fix everything. It's a huge piece of the puzzle, but we need to be looking at the lifestyle and the habits and all of that stuff too. So does that give you some ideas or bring up any follow-up questions there, Julie?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to level up, Steve.
Yeah.
So, in order to do that, I feel like I don't want to be on these medications, like specifically like the prednisone, like I was saying. It does bring just one more question, just because, I feel like I've always, with dialysis and all of that, I was always, I guess, been taught to are told basically to avoid eating so much protein, because with the kidney disease and illness, I've had protein in my liver in the past. So I wasn't sure if that is the same protein that's found, not in my liver, sorry, in my urine, I meant to say, if that's the same protein.
Yeah, this myth is one that is dying a very slow death, and we're trying to speed up its eradication from this messaging that protein is harmful to the kidneys, because it's not what the literature supports. Like, protein in and of itself is not damaging to the kidneys. In fact, in a healthy person, you can eat enormous amounts of protein and kidney function is going to do just fine. So where's the elephant in the room? What are we missing here? Again, it's insulin resistance, it's metabolic dysfunction, it's a rampant state of oxidative stress in the body. When we go wholesale animal-based and we remove the packaged foods, the processed foods, the seed oils, and we start to implement these other lifestyle changes, and our insulin sensitivity comes back online, and the health of our mitochondria come back online, things heal. Protein is not the problem. It's pretty much impossible to cause protein-induced kidney damage in the absence of metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance. So let's focus on what the real problem is. And if you've had a rough go of it in the past with diet, eating the standard Western diet like we all have, then that's the thing that is currently healing right now. And that's the thing that could have been driving a lot of the onset of these autoimmune conditions. And when we know better, we can do better. And that's what we're doing now. So I wouldn't stress it too much. I think, again, that you're going to meet some resistance if you openly talk to your doctor about this and trying to meet our recommendations around protein numbers, because there is a lot of fear. But that's changing too, even in the medical literature, and doctors are updating their stances on this and really hopefully starting to see that the big issue here is this insulin resistant story and this metabolic dysfunction. Focus on the animal-based framework, and that is improving on a day-to-day basis, and that's going to be your path again towards radical health, and hopefully one day getting you off these medications and getting you back to a position where you're thriving. And I just wanted to refer for the audience that listening, Julie mentioned the autoimmune stack, and that's a combination of histamine and immune, gut and digestion, and immuno milk products. So we love stories like yours, Julie, and we want to support you. So we're going to get you that stack sent to you again and re-up so you can continue on this healing journey. And we're wishing you the best of luck and strength and healing moving forward. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Next up is Jackie from Ohio. who has a question here maybe about gut health and some other fun stuff. So Jackie, what's going on today? Let us know your question and we'll see how we can help you.
Yeah, first I just want to start off by saying thank you guys so much for your amazing supplements, because I immediately noticed a difference as soon as I started taking them. I had this like flush that kept happening as if I had taken niacin, like my cheeks got rosy. I had so much energy, my skin was glowing, and I feel really good when I take them first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, and it actually got to the point where I don't even want to drink coffee when I take them first thing, and I go and I, get outside and I ground and I get some sunshine and I move my body. Then it's like, that's my morning fuel.
Love that.
So I'm loving those. They're definitely working. I do want to try the immune stack as well now that you mentioned that, because my issue was definitely autoimmune as well, and some undiagnosed things like rashes that I'm still struggling with. And so, I'm doing all the things. I'm following the 7 steps. I was kind of living that life before because I had to. And I've understood that for me, I believe the autoimmune disorders were definitely coming from an energetic place of like unresolved anger and, a long time of living in fight or flight.
Yes.
And so, going through that holistic journey of healing, I'm still at this place where it's like I'm noticing the changes. I am being strict with my diet. I'm seeing the results. But regarding spirituality and longevity, would be my first question. Is like, we talk about eliminating, the vegetables and things that are going to have the oxalates that interrupt your protein fermentation and all this stuff. Well, what's the end goal with it? I want to do this, but like long term, to continue to strengthen my body and, be resilient and have vitality. But do I have to stay strict forever? Or is it like through this process of doing this, I'm healing my gut and I'm healing my nervous system, so that I can have a little bit more flexibility in the long term. And I'm not talking about with like processed sugars and things. I'm talking about whole foods, because I'm at the point where I will have terrible gas pain just from eating like one nightshade, know? And so I'm like, for longevity, that would be my first question is that something that because we all know that like biodiversity in the gut is what's key, right?
Yes.
Like having many different forms of things. And I mean, I'm making my own kefir. I'm eating homemade kraut. I'm doing all the things, but I'm still struggling.
Yeah. Well, that's such a good question, Jackie. And I love your framing of it in terms of, just continued growth and evolution and longevity. And I think you hit on something that's really important. And sometimes, we should focus on it a little bit more, which is a lot of people come to, animal-based and, these restrictive elimination diets because we are trying to heal. And the reason so many of us are trying to heal is unfortunately because we got sick by living in a pretty sick world with a sick food system and sick water and sick air and you name it. So this is a really powerful place to come and heal and reset. And we want for everybody to be able to eat the most diverse, abundant, nature's provided fuels and foods as possible without the effects of the deterioration of health. Or like you said, I'd like to have some nightshades in the future, but right now it's giving me gas. That doesn't mean that that's the life sentence though, right? That doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to eat a bell pepper in the future or a tomato, or if your favorite vegetable is Brussels sprouts, that you're never going to be able to eat them. But right now they just might not be right for you yet. But as you heal and you increase your resiliency and you're balancing and you're coming into homeostasis, and you even take this spiritual stance to thing where you're not fretting or worrying so much about food, that you take a lot of that power back. But healing takes time. It's not linear. Some things are really stubborn, but it sounds like you're doing a lot of the right stuff, supporting the microbiome with the kefir, going animal-based, taking the liver pills. You said you live in the 7-step framework. I wonder if this is just a consequence of time, but also just to validate your question is, yes, absolutely. If you want to eat some different plant matter in the future, do that. As we say here, and Paul said time and time again, like if you're thriving and you're eating onions and garlic or whatever it is that you want to get down on, then eat that. We want you to have fun. We want everything you eat to be delicious, but we just have to sometimes remove things that we believe should be healthy or shouldn't be so much of a problem for people. But that isn't an ideal world. That's when we've got a healthy population without antibiotic use in the past, potentially being born by C-section, and on and on and on, you name it. But we can heal. We are healing, and that increases our resiliency to things like plants and this idea, that's been talked about so much in terms of plant matter in the past about, well, plants have antioxidants, which is actually not true. Plants have pro-oxidants that create the body, or force the body to create antioxidant responses. So plants are a hormetic stressor. They basically give you a little dose of stress, so your body adapts, it produces the antioxidants, you get a little bit stronger because of it. But if it's a little stressor on top of a stress system, and stress is stress is stress, and on we go, then they're just not right for us right now. But that doesn't mean that they won't be right for us forever. So absolutely do believe that you can heal, and you can start to include more diversity in your plates if you want those things. And when you've come into that, you'll be a very clean slate to be able to listen. Okay, it's been a few months. I feel really good. I'm moving in the right direction. My autoimmune condition is kind of slowing down and subsiding. Let me try that again. And your body's either going to give you a little bit of a thumbs up and a green light, or it's going to say, yep, nope, still got to pump the brakes here, Jackie. And that's a consequence of time. So does that help you on that front? And I know you had like some other threads here that you might want to entertain, but does that help you with this idea of just playing the long game when it comes to healing and diversifying the diet?
Yeah, I think it is. That's a very well said. I think it definitely is time, because even through the holidays, I had some slip ups with, family meals and things like that. And so, again, I think it's like that detox cup, that detox funnel is just still a little too full. And I can tell, if I eat something and I get a migraine, or my shoulders and my neck tense up from the inflammation. So I think it is just kind of playing that waiting game, and, how long am I going to have to be a little bit more disciplined before I have that freedom?
Yeah.
Can I ask one other question about digestion?
Please do. Let's go.
So I noticed that I really crave fat, and I will love eating like the raw heavy cream and a ribeye steak. But also that I look at the calculator on like CarnivoreMD or Heart and Soil, I can't remember what it was, but I look at the calculator for my desired macros and everything, and I have a really hard time eating that much protein. And is it because like I'm taking the hydrochloric acid supplements from Bioptimizers?
Okay. Good.
Because I feel like maybe it's low stomach acid or digestive enzymes that's not allowing me to digest it fully, and then I'll notice that the fat's not digesting either.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious if, some people just need less protein, or if it is probably mostly a digestive issue.
Yeah. When it comes to this, I'm almost thinking like, is this a chicken or egg scenario? Like, which came first? Because on one sense, the difficulty digesting that much protein is a consequence maybe of low stomach acid, and actually was going to, go down that path of the betaine hydrochloride, the HCl, because that can really help heal. But the ultimate goal here is that eating more protein will naturally drive up those processes, will naturally increase the stomach acid, which will have you digesting that protein and assimilating the nutrients a little bit better. When we think about fat digestion, it's a little bit different. It's a kind of an emulsification process that's got a lot to do with bile in the gallbladder. And if we're not digesting fat well, that usually would look like runny stool, watery stool a little bit. The protein digestion piece is more of that, just you're having a lot of difficulty, I don't know, maybe with bloating afterwards, or it feels slow. Or is it just the fact that the numbers are a lot higher than recommended, and it's just a lot of total food that you don't feel like you can get in? Because you were saying, like, I'm energized from the liver pills, I sometimes don't even feel hungry, and I'm ready to go. So is it manifesting as digestive discomfort, or is it manifesting as like, hey, I just can't eat that much?
I think it's a little bit of both. I've definitely experienced, like I just made like a pound of ground beef and was like, hey, I'm supposed to eat 1.5 pounds a day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for it. And I could only eat half of it throughout the entire day. And there has been times where I've been bloated.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I eat more protein, I'm not as bloated.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I eat too many carbs from the fruit that I'm more bloated.
Mm-hmm.
So if I keep my protein higher than the carbs, I'm less bloated. But I do also feel like it's that I don't have that appetite. Like the organs, and then I'm intermittent fasting, and I just don't really want to eat that much.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. So see it as a goal, right? It's a goal. You're working towards it. You don't necessarily need to be there now. In fact, the belief that you should be there now is only going to frustrate you because you're like, wow, I've really got to force myself here to the point where I don't feel good. These are ideal recommendations, you must remember, and we're all healing. And what you might need to do is slowly over time creep up to that number. That's a very interesting point you made, that the more protein you eat, the easier digestion gets, because that's back to my chicken or egg point. The more protein you eat, the more stomach acid you produce, and the easier digestion is. And maybe right now, because you're on a healing journey, that less of the carbohydrates with that meal in the form of fruit is good. Maybe they need to be eaten in a standalone setting, or maybe they just play on the lower side for a little bit. Now, again, ultimate goal is diversity and including those and getting those adequate numbers. But again, this autoimmune conundrum and this healing conundrum is very rarely linear. It's very as simple as saying, like, this is the rule for everyone. These are ideals, and sometimes it just takes time to get there. So what I would do is just slowly titrate up, like that pound of ground beef that you're struggling to eat right now, chip away at it, cook the pound over the day and just chip away at it. And then eventually, like, okay, a pound became manageable for me. And now, like, we'll throw that extra half pound in a day, and we're spreading it out the way we need to spread it out and healing as we continue on this journey. And it sounds like it's a little bit of both, from the just I'm full standpoint and the digestive standpoint. But what's very interesting as we get more into this thermogenic effect of eating more protein and more of this pro-metabolic state where our metabolism is revving up, the engine's running a little bit hotter, we're building some muscle, that we seem to be able to increase our capacity to get a little bit more too. So the hunger kind of the protein will beget more hunger, and eating more food is ultimately the goal, because sustainability and healthy body composition is basically eating as much of the right foods with this bounty of nutrition and bioavailable resources as we can, while maintaining healthy weight, looking good, feeling good, and performing good whilst healing. And I know you mentioned that you'd also like to try the autoimmune stack as well. So let's double that up and let's throw you on as well, Jackie, because it sounds like a lot of other stuff is moving in the right direction. I think those will really support you. So we'll get you some of that shipped out, and we'll hook you up with one of the health success team here as well to give you a little bit of guidance on how to implement that into your existing routine. So great questions, Jackie. Keep going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the clarity.
And last but not least, we have Matt, who's calling from Utah. Mr. Matt, what is your question, my friend? Let's see how we can help you.
Well, I sure appreciate your time today. I'm 57 and I'm on a path to 120 years old, and I'm doing my best to look at all aspects, physical, spiritual, mental.
Love it.
Especially my diet is on that journey, and I'm grateful I found Heart and Soil. Appreciate your vision and your products. I've had some recent successes. I'm kind of incrementally adopting this as I study it and try to understand, and not make a major pivot, but just take it easy and work myself into it. I've had a couple of recent successes that may be of interest, but I do have a particular question, and your discussion today was insightful and motivational. It's kind of a wake-up call. I appreciate the punch in the nose.
Awesome.
This concept of unearned dopamine is really intriguing. I'm going to do a little more research on that. But as I listen to you, and as I've had some recent successes, I'm curious about hyperdosing. I've been taught by a physician some time ago to hyperdose on vitamin C, which I've been doing for some time, and I'm just wondering what your take is on that, as well as the product. I've tried Warrior, I've tried Liver, I've tried and the Bone Matrix, and I'm supposed to take 4 of those supplements throughout the day. It's difficult for me to be disciplined, and I'm very busy, but sometimes I just take it all at once. And so hyperdosing, is this problematic? Is it bad to take the supplements all at once? And what are your thoughts?
Okay, Cool question, Matt. Thank you. And I'm glad we gave you a friendly little punch in the nose, as it were. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your journey and your quest to live to 120 years old. Let's help you on that. So yeah, that's interesting. I kind of dove into the research on that hyperdosing of the vitamin C not that long ago. You know, it is interesting theory. I think a lot of that research comes from Linus Pauling's recommendations of just crazy amounts, like grams and grams of vitamin C per day. And the takeaway that I got from that is that what essentially is beneficial about that potentially in the short term is saturating the body and the tissues with vitamin C, which can have an antioxidant effect, but it's temporary and you don't need to continue doing that over the long term, because essentially once your body is saturated with vitamin C and you've maybe made up for a deficit, let's say, because your system has been stressed and we're living in a chronically kind of inflamed environment and we're using up a lot of that because we're in a pro-oxidative state, that continuing at those mega high doses is probably doing nothing that's beneficial except causing digestive distress and runny stools. So I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with thinking about a vitamin C supplement as long as it's well sourced. It's classically ascorbic acid. Some issues around that would do with heavy metal contamination and things like that. So you want to be very careful and cautious about where you get it from to make sure it's very clean, and look for kind of an analysis or a certificate from the company that's creating it. However, this is where we now, if you've been doing this for a while, this is where we might now say it could be time to potentially look at stopping that, because there should be an abundant amount of vitamin C on a well-formulated animal-based diet. You know, we're not steering away from fruits, and we know that fruit has a good amount of vitamin C. We even know that liver has a good amount of vitamin C, and you've got those things in the diet there. But now we come to this hyperdosing potentially of the heart and soil supplements. And this is something that every person's different depending on where your nutrient inadequacies lie and how much of a deficit you're trying to take care of. There might be a time and a place for stacking supplements on top of one another, but we also want to proceed with a little bit of caution there, because these are powerful. These supplements have an amazing amount of things like vitamin A and preformed retinol. And if we're taking 4 different supplements at the full dose, we are vastly exceeding the RDA. Now, we know the RDA is a kind of bunk and they probably should be 5 to 10 times what they are, but we still can get too much of a good thing. And we want to be careful about that. And I see, the issue seems to be just convenience factor of like, all right, now I've got a palm full of pills and I'm just going to throw them all down the hatch. And if we want to do that, I think it's okay. But I think we might want to just diversify the stack a little bit, so we're not doubling down and maybe overdoing it too much. Like if we just did Warrior, which is liver and heart, and then we did beef organs, and then we did something else with liver, it's like loads and loads of liver. Maybe the stack becomes Warrior and Immunomilk for some colostrum and Bone Matrix for some collagen, and it's just a little more diverse. So even though we're taking a hyperdose, we're not hyperdosing a specific nutrient. Does that make sense? Does that give you some ideas and any questions that come from there?
Yeah, it does. It gives me something to think about. I've taken some good notes, and I'm going to continue to think about this unearned concept and maybe work away from the hyperdosing. I recently had surgery on my hand, and my doctor told me to take vitamin D so I could get that bone growth healing, and I was already taking the matrix and the bone matrix supplement, and I started looking at the amounts in the vitamin D supplements that he had prescribed and what was in matrix. The matrix was way more than what he had prescribed, so by taking both, I would have been way over the top. But I just stuck with the matrix, and I've had, at 4 weeks, he noticed in the x-rays that the bone growth was substantial. He was shocked.
That's cool.
He was expecting out of 6 to 8 weeks, and he said 4 weeks, this is uncommon. And I just kept it to myself, but I thought that was a real win, and I've had a great rehab. So again, grateful to the supplements. I attribute it to that. So I also had a recent situation with a diagnosis of fatty liver. I was on the edge, not a full-blown diagnosis, but teetering on it. And so I took the liver supplement, and I recently had a physical, and the report is I've taken 2 points reverse to where I was headed. And again, the physician was pleased. How are you doing that? I did tell him what I was doing in that case. But so that was a couple of good success stories for me that motivate me to want to keep on the path and keep trying. So appreciate the product, appreciate your answers, and I'll do a little more study on this. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, Matt, that's so awesome to hear. And I think, the products are obviously amazing. We hear these kinds of stories and love hearing more anecdotal success stories of healing, but the product needs a willing dance partner, otherwise it just sits in a bottle. So I want to celebrate you for thinking about this stuff a little bit, going outside of the conventional viewpoints and taking your personal responsibility for your health and healing like a 20-year-old with targeted supplementation and all of that stuff. So just very cool to hear, Matt. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep thinking about these things. Keep asking great questions. Keep taking notes and keep running this experiment. And we'll see you on your 120th birthday. Good job, my friend.
Amen.
All right, crew.
Amen.
That's it, Radical Health fam. That's it for today, at least. As always, we'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. But just remember and take with you from this conversation that cheap dopamine costs a lot. And it costs a lot of mental capacity, health. It's potentially driving you into undesirable, borderline addictive tendencies. And if we are going to take our power back, then we really need to be aware of all of this stuff. Again, yes, what we feed ourselves is so important. What we remove from the diet is so important. But these healthy habits, this awareness of this stuff, taking a critical assessment of life so we can live our why, so we can have a life that we feel good about, that we're in alignment on, it makes it all the more rich. So say no to cheap dopamine. Maybe that's a dopamine fast. Maybe you take a week off social media. Maybe you stop going for such quick, easy fixes and you earn your dopamine, because it is a wonderful drug. It is wonderful, but it must be earned. So go out and get it. Go out and chase it with hard work and virtue and all of that fun stuff. And we will see you next week, where we'll have more insights, more ideas, special guests, all of that fun stuff. We love you. See you soon. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.